just picking up on that before we dive into deeper into the book, I'd love to get your opinion, the medical opinion, on the benefits, because often I recommend to people the cold exposure and they look at me with this kind of blank stare thinking, he's crazy. I'm not going to expose myself to cold showers. I don't see the benefits. Can you cite the benefits of cold therapy? And this is something, one of the pillars obviously of the Wim Hof method.
So first of all, if you are crazy, then you are just as crazy as Charles Darwin, because actually Charles Darwin, a very long time ago in the 19th century, a couple of English doctors went over to Germany, and they discovered a very long German tradition of, I think the German word is Wasserkur, the water cure or the water course. And it was very widely practiced in Germany, what was then Germany and Switzerland and that sort of area. And they brought the practice back to England, to Malvern. And they opened this water cure center in Malvern, where they offered treatments such as steam rooms. So they obviously there was no kind of construction for a sauna at the time, but they offered hot steam baths, and they offered ice cold baths and ice cold showers. And Charles Darwin, after his trip on HMS Beagle, his mind was clearly on fire, but it clearly had some kind of consequence on his physical well-being, because when he returned, he was plagued with a lot of illness, which most doctors at the time could not solve. So he went to this water cure center, and he wasn't alone. Florence Nightingale was another frequent visitor, as was Alfred Lord Tennyson. But, Charles Darwin is the scientist, so he went there several times, and he found that the whole water therapy actually really, really helped him. And he wrote about it, and there are lots of personal private letters to his relatives where he writes how he found it incredibly beneficial, and he's so-called cured. Of course, we don't know if he really was cured or not, but subjectively he felt cured. And he said, people call this quackery, but I know for sure, I've been there, it isn't any such thing. And of course, at the time, there was very little science to kind of support the idea of doing it. But Charles Darwin would agree with you for sure.
Yeah, that's the first time I've been referenced to Charles Darwin in the same sentence.
But I mean, coming back to the science of it. So I think if we were to be very strict and look at the medical literature, there is a lot of literature on sauna therapy. And in a way of speaking, so that if we just step back a little bit and come back to the autonomic nervous system. So one of the key roles of the autonomic nervous system is to regulate body temperature. So when you heat up, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in and cools you down. And the opposite happens, and the sympathetic nervous system actually does play a role also in heating you up in the first place. It actually plays a very dual role, so following an ice bath and so on. But temperature regulation is a very important arm of the autonomic nervous system, and there is data that primarily relates to heat, but there is some data also on kind of heating and cooling that suggests that doing this can or seems to improve autonomic regulatory markers, so things like heart rate variability and so on. So there is certainly emerging evidence. Unfortunately, this has not been very well studied for decades and decades, despite Charles Darwin's praise of it. So we're only really just learning about it. But this whole thermoregulation is really played out by the autonomic nervous system. I mean, in a very general way, our autonomic nervous system actually shifts as the seasons change. So there is a parasympathetic dominance in winter, there is a sympathetic dominance in summer, and these shifts are also correlated with our immune regulation and so on. So there is certainly emerging evidence to suggest that playing with thermoregulation has a very important role in autonomic well-being.